All right, guys. I think it's working. We're also live on YouTube on the channel I have created for all my classes. So this is our first official video for our first out of the 15 weeks of the semester. This is PED318, Sports Management, and we're going to cover the very first chapter. Today I'll be sharing my screen, and excuse me, it's just some general but also very important information for whatever we need to cover the following weeks. I want to remind you that this Sunday, the only thing you have to submit is your extra credit learning opportunity. You don't have an LO for this chapter. However, please go over the material because again, it's very basic for whatever we're gonna cover next. All right, excellent. So I'm gonna share my screen now, and we're gonna go to a PowerPoint. Hopefully it will work. It looks like it's working, right? So for today, we're talking about sports management. I'm trying to use my clicker, but I don't know if it's going to work. Probably not. Maybe I need to, let me see, stop sharing. And then maybe now it will work. Let me try to share my screen now. Okay, it's working now. Excellent. I guess, you know, things like this will happen because we are we're all learning. So for today, some basic stuff about, you know, sports management. As you can see, some of the principles and some applications. So for today, what are we going to cover and what I want you to know once we're done with this chapter is, of course, the unique features of sport. That's very important. Also the environment and the organizational structure of sport. Crucial also is the three-sector model of sport, and you see the profit, non-profit, and the public sector. And then some unique aspects of this management, sports management, and pretty much we're going to explain why do we need to have sports management, why management, the general management principles are not enough. What makes sport that unique that we need sports management, right? All right, think about any sport, right? And think, last night, for example, it was the final game for the UEFA Champions League. So if you love soccer, you probably watched the match last night, the game, and it was between Paris Saint-Germain and Bayern, and we have some actual cases about Paris Saint-Germain for this class. So it's definitely interesting. It's a major economic activity, right? Imagine how many people work in the background, how much money we're talking about, sponsors, media, right? How many people are making money today just by reporting what happened last night during the game, betting, okay, waging, a lot of money. And we're talking about something that's going on globally. So you don't have to be in Europe to watch the soccer game. You can be in Asia, you can be in Australia. So it's something that is huge. And of course, it's a social activity, right? Let's talk about American football. Okay, let's talk about the Super Bowl. Let's talk about what's happening during that day, how people are leaving work to go home or meet friends, and just watch the game. The wins that are being consumed during that day, like how many people are making money. There's a cluster of businesses that are have to work together just for that day. Media, of course, singers, music groups, all kinds of things are happening. Of course, the ads. There's so much going on, and that's just two examples. Of course, nowadays for sports management, you see, the consumption patterns. For example, I can be on a beach in Greece, relaxing and watching the Super Bowl, right? So who's watching the Super Bowl? How they're watching it? Um, and what are the demographics of those people? So the consumption and the demographics, the characteristics of the consumers are very special. Okay, we'll have to take that into consideration when we're talking about sports management. Who is producing that product, right? And how is this being produced? How many people are being involved? Think about the Olympic Games. Think about the volunteers, paid stuff, the International Olympic Committee, how all these things are happening, and they submit their proposals, and then some cities are getting accepted towards the final stage, and then they decide who's going to organize the games, and then we'll have huge venues that have to be planned, and then we have huge events, and then media again, and sponsors, and local sponsors, and international sponsors, and athletes coming from all over the world and supporting stuff. So it's a major business. And when we combine those consumption patterns and then those production systems, we have special management needs, which is something that, of course, we are going to analyze during the whole semester, right? So for you, the student who is interested in sports management, and we're going to talk about many different kind of levels. Like you can be something that has to do with a community, that has something that has a national level. It can be something that you are in a profit organization or non-profit. And I'll explain all this as we go. But in any case, of course, you need to understand and you need to know the industry context, right? The sport environment and the range of sport organization. And those are all things that we're gonna cover. All right, let's talk a little bit about the special features of this product, which is called sport, right? Relax, grab your coffee, as I have, and let's go over them and let's see why this is very important. And of course, as you understand, we didn't used to have this course, and I really insisted on having sports management instead of just management, and I developed it 3 years ago, and this is the third time I'm teaching it actually, and it's my little baby, and I'm very pleased that this is part of our curriculum. All right, that was a side note. Let's talk about sport. Do you see rational passions? Do you see people watching the Super Bowl or any game and just their favorite team is losing and they just break the TV, or they just get really upset or really happy, really excited? Your favorite team won last night, right? And you wake up the next morning and you're so happy, like you were actually playing, or you were actually a part of the team, or you own part of the team. It's crazy how much we associate with something that is not ours, but we are happy when they are successful, and we're so sad when they're not, right? And you see in other countries, like groups of people, like Brazil, for example, or Argentina, they're really passionate about soccer. Like they just hooligans, or even back in the day in England, right? Or even now, like in Germany or even in Greece, they meet up and they just beat each other for a soccer team, right? And for somebody who's outside, that doesn't make sense. It's irrational. And we have many, many other examples, of course. All right, performance measures. How do you measure the performance of a sport organization? Think, how? Is it only by win to loss ratio? What if you lost, but you thought your team played very well? Is it based on profit? Because we know there are teams like Dallas Cowboys, right? Not very successful, but very, very, very profitable. So what are you using as your key performance indicator? And we're going to talk about all these things as we go. Let's say you have a non-profit organization. How do you measure that performance? How do you measure it by how many athletes competed this year in the Olympics? Is that successful? Is it by how many sponsors you have this year? Is it by how many volunteers you have this year? How do you measure performance? So it is an industry that it doesn't have a very specific way. Like if you're Nike or Adidas, right? It's about profit. Did you make more? Did you make less? And that's pretty much it. But for these cases, it is not. And we're going to talk about that as we go. Now, interdependence, and this has to do with the next feature as well. Do we really want the, let's say, Los Angeles Lakers, right, to win the NBA championship every year? Do you want the New England Patriots to win every year? Well, the answer is no, because your product then is predictable. Also, you don't games that some teams are always losing by a lot, and you pretty much know the result even before the game starts. So and remember all the big rivalries, right? Bulls Celtics, for example. Bulls will never be Bulls without Boston Celtics back in the day. So you need your opponent to be good, which is kind of weird, right? So my success depends on how good you are as well. I don't want you to suck. That's not good for the product. It's not going to be interesting. So think, for example, about like NBA, right? There's a thing called salary cap. So you have a specific amount of money you can spend as a team. So you don't have a huge competitive advantage against the others. Why? So we keep that competitiveness close between the teams. So again, there's interdependence, which is not the case in other industries, right? You want to be the one. You want to move to monopoly and be the only one in the market, the only player who have the whole share of the market to destroy everybody else and just be the best. In sports, you don't. And some people, a lot of times we talk about anti-competitive or anti-competitive behavior, but it is not really, because as I explained, you really need your opponents to be good. Now, we have the same team, and let's say they're playing this week and their performance is great, whatever indicators you have or measures, and then next week they suck. So you can't really count on their performance. For whatever reason, they were playing home, away, it was raining, it was windy, 3 players got injured last week, or 3 players came back from injury this week. Also, there's so many other factors, like the other team, refs, right? Media, sponsors. So you can't really expect any kind of specific performance, which is very unique as well. Let's move on. High product and brand loyalty. How many times have you changed your favorite team? This is not something that happens, right? But if I keep buying Nike and my Nike shoes are not good enough for me for whatever reason, then I'll switch to Adidas, right? If I buy this chair that I'm sitting on and it's not good enough, next time I'm not buying from the same company, right? Think about your team. Most likely, your team didn't win the championship. Are you going to support them this year? Of course you will. It's your team. But again, what makes sense in sport may not make sense in another industry. Right? Carries identification, right? We buy memorabilia. We buy the jersey of our favorite player. We buy the things that they are trying to sell us because they have sponsors. Anything. LeBron James was advertising for Kia. Anything like cars, small things, big things, phones, computers, anything that really doesn't have to do with sports, but because these people are using them, right? Or they have sponsors, right, who are paying those athletes to be in those commercial spots. We are like, yeah, I'll buy this because my favorite player was using it. Again, that's a very unique thing that happens just in this industry. Let me ask you another question. Most likely, right, your team didn't win the championship this year. Maybe the coach was substituted, some players were substituted. Are you optimistic about this year? Heck yeah, you are, right? Like every year, no matter what, you're like, yeah, but this year will be different. This year we'll have this guy. This year we have this coach. This year, we moved the stadium and we're gonna play over there. This year, and guess what? Most of the time, nothing changes. And then in the beginning of the following year, again, you're very optimistic. Think about other industries. Do you do that for anything else than sport? I don't think so. A lot of teams are reluctant, and a lot of franchises are reluctant to embrace new technology. In a lot of cases, as in sport, like winning team doesn't change, right? So when you're trying, even as a coach, to bring in new technologies, or they're always skeptical. And also, let me ask you this. Can Nike produce more shoes if they really wanted to, if they plan on it next year? What about Adidas? Can they produce more shirts? Yes, right? So what's happening with games though? Can you just play as many as you want? Think about NBA. How many games can they play? NFL, NHL, anything, baseball, right? No, they have to play, for example, in NFL, specific number, right, of preseason games, and then specific number of in-season games. And then if they move to the playoffs, specific number of games. And then as they keep going, everything is detailed and pre-planned. So there's limited supply. You can just be like, oh, yeah, you know what? My team this year will play 3 more games. No. NFL has been trying to do that, right? And it goes through the governance of the whole league in order for them to approve. Even the days of the changes, the Thursday game, even this had to go through the governance, the committees of the league. So again, very, very unique. And if you put them all together, all these two things together, right, that makes the sport industry so unique. All right. Let's talk about some things about the environment. in how that affects the environment of sport, and then of course the environment of sport management. Globalization, right? Games are everywhere, 24/7. You can have access. You can pay to have access. For example, even in collegiate sports, right? University of Texas, Austin, Texas, the Longhorns, right? You can pay to have access to a private network and watch practices, collegiate. So we're talking about something that's global. People in China, New Zealand, Australia were very interested last night towards the Champions League game, right? And even like bet money on it. But would stay up until really late or really early, wherever, depending on wherever they are, and watch it. And of course, that affects the management. If you're a manager, you need to be aware of that. Government policy. Can the government affect if you have, let's say, a profit franchise, corporation, business? Of course, for example, the government has policies that have to do with waging. They have policies that have to do with anti-doping control. That affects the industry. Professionalization. Like since the 80s, the sport industry has evolved so much, right? And that affects, of course, the management. And of course, all these are interrelated, like globalization and professionalization, right? So we can have in the NBA player from Greece, like the Greek freak, right? So all these are interrelated. And of course, the impact of technology, which is something that is huge, and it affects pretty much everything. We're talking about technology that has to do with even anti-doping control, technology that has to do with broadcasting, technology that has to do with safety in helmets. You can have your smartphone if I want to go back to broadcasting and watch a game on your phone right now if you want to. Replay, go back and replay whatever you want to see again. You can bet money on whatever through your phone as well. So as a manager, you need to understand all these features of the environment that you're going to be involved, right? All right, this is something that we're going to stay here for a while, and we're going to have separate chapters for all these three different components. But for now, I want you to understand those three huge players. All right. So, public sector. Does the public sector affect the sport industry? What do you think? Have the government, if we want to put it that way, invested money in your neighborhood to create like basketball courts or parks? As I said before, do they affect the sport industry through anti-doping laws or taxes? Of course. What about supporting local organizations that have to do with youth sport, right? As you can see, first of all, we have those three players: the public sector, the non-profit, and the professional or for-profit sector, and they're all interrelated. They cannot function in isolation, right? You see that they overlap, all three of them. So if we're done with the public sector, I just gave some examples. Let's talk about the nonprofit. A nonprofit, a lot of times, when we think about nonprofit, and I used to be like that, we think small, right? Something is nonprofit. Well, let me tell you this, although we're going to cover it in the next chapters. The International Olympic Committee, IOC, which organizes the Olympic Games, right? A major event that takes place every 4 years, is a nonprofit. So when you think about And also, when you think about non-profit, don't think that they don't make profit. What that means is that they have to take the profit and reinvest it. They cannot distribute profit, for example, as dividends, which is something that the professional or for-profit sector does, like an NFL team, right? Now, how do they affect each other? The public sector, through their laws and their support, they can give money or they can take away money, right? They can affect, as I said, the youth by giving money, grants towards organizations that support youth talent development. And that's definitely something that helps a nonprofit. At the same time, through taxes and anti-doping laws, they affect the professional organization. Now, the nonprofit, how can they affect the public sector? Of course, because the public sector, if they have, for example, let's talk about the Olympic Games. Is that something that will affect the country? Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like how? For example, tourism, right? Tokyo 2020 are not taking, they're not going to happen. They're going to happen hopefully next year, but will that affect the public sector? Oh yeah, of Japan, definitely. Definitely. So it's a non-profit organization that will affect the public sector of that country. Can the non-profit affect the professional? Yeah, definitely. Because for example, the non-profit or the youth development are probably those players that are going to go into pro and become pros, right? So let's see now how the professional can affect the public sector nonprofit. In many, many ways. Let's talk about professional and public sector. It can affect it. A game is happening and then like half of the city is closing down. Also the taxes that they're offering back to the public sector. And at the same time, the pride, because a lot of the professional players are going to go to the national team. And if the national team plays very well, then the public sector is going to gain a lot, right? How do they affect the nonprofit? Well, if the pros do very well, then for example, the younger kids that are gonna that are thinking about a sport, like, oh my God, this player did this, did that. I just watched the Olympics. I just watched the World Cup. I just watched this. I'm gonna go into that sport, and then they're gonna sign up in those nonprofit local, for example, organizations. So we have this three-sector model, and they're all interacting with each other. They're all very important players, and they cannot function in isolation. That's what I want you to remember for now. A lot of things are different, and we're going to cover all these things about strategic management, organizational structure, HRM, for example. It's very unique, for example, that when we talk about sports management and HRM, that a lot of times the employees, I'm sorry, aka the players, are getting paid more than the coaches, right? That creates a very interesting situation with human resource management. What's the organizational culture? Are we going for the win? Are we going for profit? Of course, that's very important. And then financial management, of course, sports marketing, very complex nowadays. The manager has to talk with, like lawyers and anybody who is working advertising, and we're talking about agents, and it's way more complicated than within media. Media and sport are so interrelated. We don't really know if media is benefiting from sport at this point or sport from media. Okay, sport cannot function at this point without media. There's no possible way. Governance, like who is making the decisions, and we're going to talk about that as well. Like, is it going to be a group of people? Is it going to be one person? Are they volunteers? Are they paid staff? Again, it depends on kind of level and on profit or profit and so on and so forth. And the last thing, of course, we're going to talk about, and we mentioned it today, is performance. Which are your KPIs, key performance indicators? Because based on that, you have to manage performance. All right, guys, these are the take-home points. Usually I make a student read them before we leave class. These are the unique features of sport. People develop irrational passions, difference in judging performance, interdependent nature of relationships between sporting organizations, anti-competitive behavior. Sport product is of variable quality. It enjoys a high degree of product or brand loyalty. It engenders vicarious identification. Sport fans exhibit a high degree of optimism. Sport organizations are relatively reluctant to adopt new technology, and sport often has limited supply. Those are the unique features. This is something that I want you to remember from this chapter. Also, you can see that globalization, government policy, professionalization, and technological development influence the way sport organizations operate. And then sport industry equals the state sector plus a nonprofit sector plus a professional sector, and they do not operate in isolation. Management of sport organization, of course, is unique, and that's why we have this class. All right, guys, this is for this week, week one from me. Let me know if you need anything. Tomorrow we have office hours. And if nothing else happens, I'll be here next Monday covering the next chapters that I will have for the week. And this is it. This is pretty much this is it. I'm going to let you go. Let me know if you need anything. Again, I want to wish you a great semester, and I'll be here next week with our next video. In the meantime, lift intentionally, not habitually. Bye, guys.